crime, cases, and backing the blue. Now, here are your hosts, Captain Ed Mamet and Detective Kevin Schroeder.
Hello, everyone. This is retired Captain, New York City Police Department, Ed Mamet, the co-host of Cop Talk. The reason I'm here today as your host is because the actual host, Detective First Rate Kevin Schroeder, is somewhere in the world doing something else. I have no idea what he's doing, but I'll check up later. Today we have a very, very interesting guest that needs little introduction, the iconic Curtis Sliwa. He is going to talk about his mayoral aspirations, about crime in the city, the illegals, and a host of other things. So, without any ado, I introduce Curtis. Thank you, Curtis.
I'll try to come out of my shell, Ed. You know, Kevin Schroeder here and you would have been a double team, but hey, you're from Canarsie, he was not. We have something in common, Captain Ed. We're Canarsie boys.
Right, we're Brooklyn guys. The best came from Brooklyn.
That's right. And by the way, you made you got your stripes working those areas, Canarsie, East Flatbush, all those areas until you rose up the ranks.
That's right. I started out in Bedford-Stuyvesant for 3 years. And then I went into the detective bureau and I worked narcotics all over the place.
You know, we're talking pretty much on the anniversary of Crown Heights. That was a sad day for the New York City Police Department because then Mayor David Dinkins told them to step down, hold back. Don't come to the aid of the Luboviches who were under attack. Maybe one of the finest days in the history of the Guardian Angels in 1991 because we saw the police were not being permitted to do their job while rioting was taking place in Crown Heights. And then for 30 days and 30 nights, we were on the corner of Kingston and President Street maintaining safety and security for the Jews who were under attack. And, boy, that was a real black eye for New York City. It took Dinkins like 3 days to wake up, only when the mob, the Sharpton-led mob, turned on him. And then he decided he gave the signal to Police Commissioner Kelly, the interim police commissioner, because guess who was out of town? Lee Brown. And he said, put it down.
Yes,
put it down, and they did.
The day was saved by Ray Kelly,
yes.
Probably one of the best commissioners the city ever had. And he wasn't the commissioner at the time. He was the first deputy commissioner. Because Lee Brown was the commissioner, as you say, out of town. And Kelly, really had no direct authority at the time, but he decided to jump in and take over, and that's what saved the day.
Interesting. Dinkins always loved Ray Kelly because they were both Marines.
Correct.
So they had an affinity. Rudy Giuliani could have taken Ray Kelly when he first got elected and beat Dinkins, but he knew of the affinity that Dinkins had for Kelly. So he passed on Kelly, and he went with Bratton. And now you know the rest of that story.
Well, I just learned something new. So tell me, Curtis, what do you see as the major problem in the city regarding the police and what they have to do? And also what City Hall has been doing to the police and actually ruining the police department?
Well, Captain Ed, to me it's sort of very simple. Everybody likes to complicate these issues. Let's take it back to the Occupy City Hall. Remember towards the end of the summer of 2020 of George Floyd, when Comrade Bill de Blasio turned over the streets to Black Lives Matter and Antifa, and again told the cops to stand down. It was like one of the worst days for 30 days outside of City Hall. They hung in effigy, remember, police officers who they had as facsimiles as pigs. They were writing curse words on all the municipal buildings, F the police. You could do anything to the police back then. It was really like one of the saddest days. Dermot Shea was up in what they call the Eagle's Nest, watching all of it from one police plaza, not choosing to put it down. And only on the 29th day, when the anarchists desecrated the sign to David Dinkins on one municipal, municipal building, did all of a sudden Bill de Blasio get upset and ordered them to take the encampment down. But that was also at a time where the whole concept of Occupy City Hall was to defund the police. That's why they gathered around. That's why they protested. And as a result, the city council did what the mayor wanted, and Dermot Shea supported. They took a billion out of the police budget. It has never been put back. So you can imagine any agency, anywhere in America, never mind anywhere in the city, you take $1 billion out of that budget, you never put it back. There is no way that that agency, the police, who are $1 short and a day late because they're $1 billion short of what would have been $6 billion budget, can ever hope to attain or be productive as it was meant to be. They give $5 billion to the migrants, people we don't even know, many of them who are criminals. You could see the gang tattoos. And they won't even put a nickel, dime, penny, or $1 back into the budget. Remember, Ed, when they passed that, the defund the police measure, the council people were dancing in the aisles. And yet, how many of them are protected by the police? I think back to the time that a former police officer was a city councilman, Councilman Davis. And he was in the well of the city council. And one of his constituents was up there in the public gallery. And he had an argument with Councilman Davis. And remember, he took out a gun. He fired on Officer Davis, striking him, killing him. And a police officer assigned to the area fired a shot and took him out. All the city council people were ducking for cover. Remember, they were crying like little babies. Oh, my God, our lives are threatened. They had an army of cops protecting them thereafter, metal detectors, the whole 9 yards. But for the rest of the people, they stripped us of our badly needed police. And I don't care who you put in as police commissioner. I don't care what new technology you develop, drones, robots. You can never hope to take this city back unless you put that $1 billion back.
That's correct. And, you know, going back to the Black Lives Matter protests, there were many things that could have been done that weren't done by the police department. First of all, why they didn't block the bridges is, I don't understand that. The people were demonstrating in Brooklyn. All you had to do was put a few garbage trucks or some other large vehicles in front of the bridges, the Manhattan Bridge, the Brooklyn Bridge, and contain them in Brooklyn. So they let them cross the bridge. People were injured, tied up traffic, and there was a lot of mayhem. Also, there was no use of the mounted police, which mounted, you know, in my time, mounted was great. They were out there. They really intimidated these people that were looking to make trouble. No more nightsticks. So there's a lot of things that were done to hinder the police. And then you have the city council with their stupid laws they passed, taking away qualified immunity, requiring them to note every encounter that they have with people. The fact that they restricted how demonstrations are handled. There's like a matrix that you can't bring in the outside force until this is reached. I mean, it was stupid, crazy. So
the signal for me, Captain Ed, was in Washington Square Park at the beginning of the George Floyd protests that turned into riots and all-out mayhem. It was Antifa and Black Lives Matter. Place was crowded with demonstrators. Hawk Newsom of Black Lives Matter New York was in charge. And the number 2 guy in the police department took a knee. What was that, Moynihan? Monahan.
Terry Monahan.
And other white shirts took a knee. They bowed in front of Hawk Newsom, who said he would burn the city down. That reminded me of that picture we learned about in elementary school, PS 114 in Canarsie, where we saw General Lee hand over his sword to General Grant at Appomattox, ending the Civil War. Right there, the police department was handing over their batons and saying, that's it. Black Lives Matter rules. We're taking a knee. It was over after that. They had capitulated. There was no reason that they should have taken a knee. They were at the beck and call of Comrade de Blasio, who hated the police, always did. Dermot Shea, who was never a street cop. You never saw him out in the streets. You never saw him when he was police commissioner. He was always hiding in the Eagle's Nest, One Police Plaza. And that, to me, signaled, it's over, wave the white flag. Remember, they damaged 1,000 police vehicles. They put cops in the hospital. They vandalized, they graffitied, they desecrated. F all police. They put these acronyms everywhere, and they were allowed to freely roam. Now, remember back when Bloomberg had a taste of that with Occupy Wall Street in Zuccotti Park. He wouldn't close that demonstration because, that's private property. And I remember, I think it was Chief Esposito at that time, the holdover from Rudy Giuliani, said, you gotta stop this. You can't allow them to stay there. Because every day they would leave the compound and they'd go out and basically cross the Brooklyn Bridge and go somewhere else, tie up traffic, and create chaos. So finally, after 30 days, Bloomberg gave Kelly and Esposito the orders, okay, shut him down. And remember, he said, we're not letting him cross the Brooklyn Bridge. I think they made 700 arrests that day. And guess what? They never crossed the Brooklyn Bridge again. They took the compound down. That was the end of Occupy Wall Street. He should have listened to Esposito and Kelly earlier, but let's face it, Bloomberg was not a street guy. He was a Wall Street guy. Thank God he left those decisions to Kelly. But on that one occasion, he just waited too long. And that became the predecessor to the George Floyd riots and the summer of 2020. And de Blasio just let him take over the city. Let him take it over.
And probably what went on at Columbia.
Oh, without a doubt. Imagine here in Columbia University. And look at what we're doing now. There will be police stationed at the university working with the security that they're turning now into armed civil officers, private security officers. Why are we putting our cops on the campus at Columbia University? Are they paying us for that? No. They're sitting on an endowment of $12 billion, right? They could actually contribute $1 billion so we could hire all the police that we had to let go when we defunded the police by $1 billion. You take $500 million from NYU that has an $8 billion endowment. You take $500 million from Columbia that has a $12 billion endowment, and there is your $1 billion that we can put back into the police budget.
Columbia ought to pay the overtime for the police that have to go there.
Oh, exactly. Police. And think of all the lawsuits that have emerged because they had to go into Hamilton Hall and take back Hamilton Hall that Columbia University had let the kids take over. And let's face it, they knew they were going to take Hamilton Hall over. They did it in 68. They do it every time there's any kind of rabble-rousing on Columbia University's campus. You know right away, what are they going to do? They're going to take over Hamilton Hall.
This National Foster Care Month, Marine Toys for Tots is providing hope to children who need it most. Staff Sergeant James Caldwell, who grew up in foster care himself, shares that while handing out gifts at a Toys for Tots distribution event, a little girl looked up at him, reached into her bag, pulled out a stuffed animal and said, "Someone needs to make sure you get a toy too." That simple gesture embodies the heart of Marine Toys for Tots, ensuring every child, including those in foster care, experiences the kindness that can transform their future. Visit toysfortots.org today.
Speaking of 68, it's a question of, Santayana said, those who fail to heed the lessons of history are doomed to repeat them. All they had to do this time was look back to 68, what was done then. This was an absolute repeat of 68. I was there in 68. A lot of cops got injured. And the same thing, Columbia waited too long, and every day that went by, the demonstrators got worse and worse. They started throwing furniture out the window. One of my dear friends was severely injured. A student jumped out a window, landed on his back, broke his back, and he had to retire on disability, and he lived a very painful life. So, it's just another question of how things go. And again, talking about the mayors, going back to Lindsay's time, it was the same thing. Where they waited too long, and the riots broke out. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but there was a court decision that people who suffered damage, property damage, store owners, were able to sue the city for lack of police protection. And that ought to be done now, again.
Oh, without a doubt. But I will tell you this with John Lindsay. Every time you knew a riot was taking place, whether in East New York, Brownsville, Harlem, his staff would say, no, it was a disturbance.
Right.
They try to create this image, John Lindsay with his jacket, on his back, walking the streets.
And his sleeves rolled up.
Exactly. Then he'd jump back into his vehicle, and he'd roll out of there. These were riots. I saw him as a kid in Brownsville and East New York. They were burning buildings down. Firefighters would try to put the fires out, and they would attack the firefighters. They would throw all kinds of debris at them, sometimes from the top of the roofs of the tenements. You needed the cops to come in from the 7-5 precinct to protect the firefighters. And John Lindsay goes to the 75th precinct at that time, East New York Avenue and Rockaway, and says, It was just a disturbance. A disturbance. It was a full-blown riot.
Well, at that time, we had the Tactical Patrol Force, and they didn't take any shit. And they were disbanded because certain groups said, oh, they're abusive. So now we have this Special Response Group, who was really just another name for the TPF.
Yeah, well, I remember Tactical Patrol Force assembling in the parking lot of Shea Stadium in the buses with the hats and bats.
Right.
Waiting to be assigned to an area where there was a, quote, disruption, where full-scale rioting was taking place. And remember, back then, the cops on the beat had as the first level of defense their wooden baton.
Right.
Their nightstick. Now they took away the nightsticks. So we see time and time again, whether it's a interaction on the street or you're trying to stop these crazy supporting Hamas, Hezbollah, Palestine from the river to the sea, attacking cops. They're wrestling in the street. The cops' guns are right there. The danger to the cops and to the general public that somebody takes the gun out and just starts shooting randomly. Why do you allow cops to have to wrestle in the streets when they used to be able to take out the wooden baton, the nightstick, and basically put it in front of him, and then you knew, don't cross it. That's a DMZ. Don't cross that line.
Or a blow across the shins. No one could stand that. Everybody went down like a totem pole.
Well, not only that, Captain Ed, if you were outnumbered and you hit the main troublemaker in the shins, and then the squad car rolled up, you say, any guy you see limping up the block, that's the guy you want to pinch.
Well, when you become mayor, what would you put in place to address these problems? Well,
first and foremost, forget the drones. They might help in some ways, but that's not the panacea of the answer. We have about 88 horses now, professionally trained, with police officers. They're up there in Pelham Park. They train basically to do control not only of large crowds, large groups, but when things reach to the point where there are disruptions and riots. I've actually seen him in the Tompkins Square Park riots when Dinkins was the mayor. They brought in the horse unit, and boy, the horse unit was able to put down the anarchists because when you saw the horses, when they turned sideways, they blocked. They were the equal of 10 cops.
Right.
Then when they were pointed forward and you thought they were going to charge the crowd, even the toughest guys got out of their way. The anarchists, they were rolling marbles, hoping that the horses, while they were walking, would fall and slip. I saw horses fall and slip and get back up and continue to do their duty. We're spending all this money on a horse unit, and all we use them for is to put two guys and gals on horses in Times Square to take pictures or to have them in a parade. They're used for crowd control. I'm telling you, a cop on a horse can see everything going on, could relay it to their other men and women who are down in the field, and we don't take advantage of it. So that's number one. Number two, I'm going to take the handcuffs off the cops. Going to visit every precinct once I get sworn in January and say, hey, look, you've all been trained. You know what to do right. You know what's wrong at the academy. If you go out of your way and you do harm, I'll be your worst enemy. But if you're doing your job, I'm going to tell Corporation Counsel, you do not settle. You fight. Because let's face it, it's an easy lawsuit. There are law firms, all they do is they inhale, they file paperwork. They know the 900 lawyers in Corporation Counsel have been told by this administration, Adams, the previous one, of the part-time mayor, the dope from Park Slope, Bill de Blasio, settle. No, you tell them, we're going to fight each and every claim. I don't care how long it takes, how much money it costs. We got the cops back. But if the cops have crossed the line, then the mayor obviously has to take on the PBA, has to take them on and say, no. In this case, you're wrong. I think people will appreciate that. The way it is now, the cops have been rendered impotent. You know, we have this saying, guys are roosters, and then they get married and they become capons, castrated roosters. Or they were stallions, and then all of a sudden, they get castrated. And it's all downhill.
Well, what bothers me most, and it bothers a lot of my friends in the police department, is the fact that the mayor will not introduce legislation to overturn those ridiculous laws passed by the city council. Now, even if they don't vote on it, he can still override it. And even if he loses an override, he sends a message. He sends a message to the city. Hey, look, I'm fighting for the police. The city council is not cooperating. They blocked my legislation. They override, my blocking of it. And I think that's very important because he always uses the term perception. Well, that's a great perception that you're a mayor that's trying to do the right thing.
Well, the problem is it's the other Adams who calls the shots. Adrienne Adams, who is the city council speaker, she has more authority than he does. He never names and shames. He never challenges his adversaries. He's not going anywhere. One thing I've learned from watching Friends and Foes as mayor, it's the end of the line. You make so many enemies at the end of being mayor, you couldn't get elected dog catcher. But they all have this image they're going to be president. Let's see. Lindsay, crashed and burned. Giuliani, America's mayor, the world mayor, crashed and burned. Couldn't even win Florida. Bloomberg tried to buy everybody for $1 billion. What did he get? America's Samoa. De Blasio was out in the cornfields. He didn't even get a vote in Iowa. And Adams had dreams when he beat me. Oh, I'm on my way to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in the future. That's why I'll bring the migrants in. All these Latinos will be so grateful to me. He didn't realize that those who came in legally, the Latinos, are really pissed because they're saying, wait a second, we came in the legal way? We had to wait. We had to bide our time. And they just get to cross the border? So the first generation immigrants are the angriest at what he's done in destroying our city. He's even said, this migrant situation will destroy us. Well, Biden, Hochul, and Adams are responsible for it. None of them have tried to stop it.
Well, you bring up something very important because the police, not only in the city of New York, but all over the country, are having major problems with the migrants. I call them illegals. When none of them are vetted, as we know, and if they're arrested, there's no way to check on their background. If they come from Venezuela, they don't have relations with Venezuela. Where are you going to have a database to check it with?
Right, but Ed, you can see the tattoos all over. You can see, did you get these tattoos upon birth? You got them when you joined the gang. They should not have been permitted into the country under any circumstance. Number two, uniformed cops are assigned outside the migrant shelters. There are 238 now in the city that we pay for, $5 million. Imagine, Ed, you're on duty, uniform, you're Sergeant Ed Mamet, and you have assigned patrol officer. You got to use the bathroom. You can't go into the migrant shelter even to use the bathroom. You can't go into the migrant shelter unless there's a 911 call in the migrant shelter. You know what the Adams administration says to the Department of Homeless Services? If you go into the shelter where the migrants are, some of them will have nightmares and will have flashbacks to their country of origin when cops came in, broke down their doors, violated their rights, raped them, abused them, assaulted them, beat them. What horse garbage, what horse nonsense. If you're going to have migrants here, cops should be able to go in and out and check on what's going on, because we know now Randall's Island has become Rikers Island. The Venezuelans run it like a house gang. And the cops, they have to go in and out. They have to do raids. And then they come out with guns, contraband, knives, machetes, and there are no arrests. How do you come out with all that contraband and you don't arrest anybody? So if you happen to be the illegals outside looking at this, you say there are no consequences. Where we got those ghost guns, where we got those machetes, knives, where we got those drugs, we'll just get replacements. And we continue to house them so they can engage in more criminal activities. Imagine as cops, you feel what you're doing is futile.
Well, how would you handle the problem?
Oh, well, number one, immediately vet all that you can, the males. Most of the migrants, I know because I visited most of the facilities, they always try to tell you it's women and children, just like with homeless people, it's not. It's single able-bodied young men of military age with nothing to do, nowhere to go, We don't even let them do volunteer work. The mayor's been asked, well, why don't you let them voluntarily clean the compound, with like brooms, go out into the community. It would be a nice PR move. People might not be as hostile. Oh, I'm not permitted to do that. What do you mean you're not permitted to do that? They're volunteers. Anybody can volunteer. No, the federal government won't let me do that. No, because you have that work contracted out to a company that's your friends. And as a result, when you do a no-bid contract, there are always kickbacks. I always say with Eric Adams, ever since he was sworn into office up in the state Senate years ago, and his first speech to everybody was, show me the money. That's what it's all about, show me the money. And that has been the hallmark of everything he does. Look, Timothy Pearson, his biggest friend, the guy who was with him in the police department, he's got 4 sexual harassment investigations. He can't even go into a room now with a woman alone. He's got to have a monitor. And he was reported saying, with all these migrant contracts, how come I only get crumbs? Now, what did he mean by that? How come I only get crumbs? We know what he means, but the mayor protects him. And yet, if you happen to be an adversary or an enemy of the mayor, he does everything he can to make your life un miserable.
And part of the problem, a big problem, is no dealing with ICE. And that is that's codified in law. Would you move to repeal that law?
Oh, absolutely. And remember, the one who really enforced it big time was Andrew Cuomo. He called ICE thugs. When he debated Mark Molinaro in the only debate he would allow at WCBS at like 7 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday with Marcia Kramer, imagine. He twice said ICE are thugs. So that means these illegals who are criminals, who ICE has access to their records, and the 2 million people who are on the terror watch list, all of them who want to do harm to America, let's face it, the evil Satan. They can't even NYPD can't even plug into the ICE computer. How ridiculous is that? We know terrorists have come across the border. It's so easy to do. They caught 8 Tajiks coming across the border, California, some of them on their way to New York, because they're all along Coney Island Avenue, in Brooklyn. And they're going to hit us. We've made it so easy to do. We feed them. We house them. They get 3 hots in a cot. We give them smartphones, iPhones. We give them health insurance. Meantime, while they're plotting on demise. This is insanity. And the mayor said, well, there's nothing I can do. If he were to challenge the city council, say, I'm ordering the police department today through an executive order, an emergency order to immediately resume working with ICE on all levels, and then let the city council sue him. Take me to court. He would be a hero to people in New York City, except for the socialists and those who actually would look forward to our demise.
Getting on to another topic. You've talked about this quite often on the radio. Crime statistics. Are they true or are they bogus?
Oh, no. Look, if you're not making arrests, it makes it seem that crime is down. The mayor has gone on record and said exactly what I said a year ago. Every day in New York City, 90,000 packages that are delivered or stolen are purloined. That's 90,000 separate crimes that are committed. FedEx packages, USPS, UPS, DHS, whatever the package, Amazon, 90,000 a day. And you will not go to any precinct of the 77 precincts and see anything on their books that indicate that packages have been stolen. Because basically, they've been told by One Police Plaza, don't put it on the books, don't make arrests. So naturally, if you're able to steal packages at random, and then you're able to shoplift in stores at random, and we've seen Rite Aid's closed, Wayne Reed's are closing, CVS, Walgreens, other shops. Well, obviously, they're not going on the books. You can't, nobody in this city believes that crime is down. I would say to the mayor, show me a neighborhood where we can walk into the neighborhood and they say, things are so much better than it was with de Blasio. A showcase neighborhood where you live with migrants, they're not shoplifting, they're not stealing packages like porch pirates. Show us a neighborhood where it's actually better. He can't show us one neighborhood where anybody would say, things are actually better under Adams.
During my 40 years in the department, the manipulation of crime statistics was prevalent with every administration. And I'll give you an example. If a grand larceny is committed or reported, and then it's analyzed, and they say, oh, it doesn't meet the criteria. It would be lower to a petty larceny. So the crime report would go from a felony to a misdemeanor. Things like that were always done. So I always felt you really can't trust these statistics that the department puts out because they're easily manipulated. And I'm sure you feel the same way.
Oh, absolutely. No, there's nobody who feels safe in New York. We saw the reporter from WINS 1010 get mugged and brutally assaulted. And she condemned her own fraternity and sorority of media and City Hall and One Police Plaza. Say, why are you repressing this war on women in the city of New York? Women are being assaulted every day in the subways, in the parks, in the streets. Remember, in 1 month of April, 50 women were assaulted on camera below 14th Street in Manhattan. Very few arrests. The mayor, perception. Ed, it's a perception. Look at the stats. It's because if it bleeds, it leads, suggesting that media only looks for those opportunities to exploit, as opposed to saying, boy, I got a problem. Instead of partying to the break of dawn, at Club Zero Bond, at
Casa
Cipriani's, at Consa Frito in the Bronx, which is now padlocked, because Sal Greco's done such a great job of following up on that. I mean, the fact is, people, even his supporters who voted against me the first time said, I never knew I was electing a nightlife mayor because that's all he does. He goes clubbing. He goes to restaurants, gets free food, hangs out till the break of dawn. Meantime, the city is slipping into the abyss. It's going from bad to worse.
Another area that we ought to talk about is Miranda and the sheriff. Now, you probably know this, that when Adams was in the police department, he associated with Miranda and this Montserrat. The three of them were three troublemakers in the department. Montserrat went to jail. Miranda is questionable. Adams, we know about Adams. What do you have to say about what the sheriff is doing with marijuana?
Well, remember the sheriff, Miranda, was appointed on the recommendation of Hiram Montserrat. Not only was he corrupt and went to jail for stealing from a nonprofit when he was a state senator. Remember, he had been a city councilman. He went out on a psych op. He went out on a psych pension. That meant when he was a cop, he went through a series of psychological tests, and the shrinks said this guy can no longer be a cop. You got to pension him out, I think at 2/3. From there, he went right into the city council. So they said basically he's disturbed. And then he took that disturbance into city council, and then the state senate. Was basically one of the most corrupt politicians that has ever existed in New York City. Sliced his girlfriend, his face, instead of taking her to Elmhurst Hospital, took her out to Long Island. And who was in court every day supporting his very good friend in what we call the celebrity pew, state senator at that time, Eric Adams. That tells you all you need to know about Eric Adams. So if Hiram Montserrat suggests Miranda as the head sheriff, a revenue agency, remember, they have no enforcement powers. They're not cops. People watching right now say, wait, the sheriff in my county, they're responsible for the jails, the courts, some of them actively patrol. No, in New York City, it was never thought of as a law enforcement agency. Revenue agents. They padlock buildings that haven't paid taxes. They seize cars, in which money is owed. They check for untaxed cigarettes, untaxed liquor, and now they're supposed to be stopping, padlocking weed stores. Except Miranda has a warehouse, an office somewhere in Long Island City where his own members through their union have said, he's telling us, stick the contraband everywhere. In every office, in open cars, there's no security whatsoever. So in my mind, whether you want to believe it's incompetence or malfeasance or on purpose, a lot of that product that they're seizing is going right out the back door and being sold into the black market, the streets. There's no doubt.
Well, the sheriff's job in New York is different from many of the sheriffs around the country. They're elected. He's appointed.
Yep.
So when you're mayor, you have to put the right sheriff in.
Well, that and the marshals. That's a patronage appointment also. So the more you tie these guys to the politicians, the more corrupt they become. That should be a civil service position like every other position in the city. I don't know if you want to give him law enforcement powers, but the fact is, when they seize contraband, this is drugs, the police department should supervise that. They're the ones who should process it, house it, warehouse it, secure it. Because I don't trust Miranda, and his own deputy sheriffs don't trust Miranda. They're always complaining about him to their union.
Right, he's gone. I read something in the paper where I think before he came on, they very rarely made any complaints, people in the union. And now Miranda has a load of complaints against him from the union people.
Well, because he runs roughshod. He basically, there are rules and regulations, and he goes, I'm Anthony Miranda, I'm El Jefe, I'll do what the hell I want to do. The mayor's got my back. Well, guess what? The mayor ain't looking. And somebody's got to be looking over the shoulder of Anthony Miranda. Anybody who ever worked with him in the police department will let you know you got to watch Anthony Miranda because he's got Velcro on his mitts.
I remember him from the department. He was a troublemaker. You know, getting back to Sal Greco and Consafrito, as you know, Sal was fired for associating with Roger Stone, who was convicted of a felony, which was, a ridiculous case. And meanwhile, up at Consafrito, you had many people with criminal backgrounds, going there. And you had high-level politicians. You had the mayor going there. And you had Eddie Caban, the police commissioner. His brother was part owner of the place. So the hypocrisy is that these people were going there, associating with people with criminal records, and nothing happens. Meanwhile, Sal Greco gets fired, loses his pension, loses everything, and is fighting now in court to get back. So there's a lot of hypocrisy in this administration.
Oh, well, more pertinent. With Eric Adams, it's do as I say, not as I do. After Mike Tyson was convicted of rape in Indianapolis, Eric Adams would not only hang out with Mike Tyson, he was hired in his off hours to do security for Mike Tyson. That was prohibited by the department. Now, why didn't he get suspended or kicked out of the department? Because his complexion was his protection. He was involved with 100 blacks in law enforcement. He was a pain to Ray Kelly. Remember, he went into a meeting of black, Hispanic, and white police officers, came out of that meeting, and claimed that Ray Kelly said racist things. Everyone else who was in that room said, what the hell are you talking about? Ray Kelly, who was the boxing commissioner of the state of New York, who worked with blacks and Hispanics constantly. You may not like Ray Kelly. You may accuse him of things. I think, without a doubt, the best police commissioner we ever had. But I can assure you, he was not a racist. Eric Adams made all of that up, and he got away with it.
Well, not only that, when Ray Kelly first became the police commissioner, he made it a point to visit black churches. And he also is responsible for increasing the number of blacks that came in the department.
Now, ask yourself this. He served Bloomberg well. Bloomberg did 8 years, missed the term limits, and then he bribed his way to another 4 years. It was always meant that Ray Kelly would get his opportunity to be mayor. He earned it. He knew all about the city. Nobody knew more about the city than Ray Kelly. Why didn't Bloomberg help him become the mayor? Why did he support Christine Quinn with the glow-in-the-dark orange Revlon hair, the former Speaker of the Council? That question has never been answered. Christine Quinn did nothing for Mayor Michael Bloomberg. I think the untold story is that Michael Bloomberg turned on Ray Kelly. Remember, Bloomberg will be remembered as a very good mayor because the streets were safe. To his credit, he did not interfere with Ray Kelly. When Ray Kelly secured us from terrorism, he went to the mayor, said, I need these items. I want to set up outposts in foreign countries because I don't trust the FBI. I don't trust the CIA to warn us in advance. They didn't do it with 9/11. And Bloomberg said, absolutely, spend whatever you need, protect New York City. And Kelly, 13 separate terrorist attempts to do us harm, and the NYPD was able to stop it. Now, you look at our anti-terrorism task force now. At one time, it numbered 1,000. With all the early retirements, regular retirements, the depletion in the ranks, do we really believe there are still 1,000 experienced men and women assigned to the anti-terrorist task force? It would be numerically impossible. And that makes us more vulnerable than ever.
Another area that you are an expert, probably more than anyone else, is the emotionally disturbed people. They're all over the place. They're out on the streets. I remember when I was a young cop, we would arrest them for, vagrancy, whatever it was at the time, and we'd take them to court, and they would be sent to what was called a workhouse for 30 days. I think it's called Camp LaGuardia.
Camp LaGuardia in Orange County.
Right.
Started during the Depression when a lot of the guys would be on a bender, drinking cheap alcohol. They'd go up there, fresh air, obviously no access to alcohol or drugs, and they would be taught a skill, a negotiable skill. And it worked. Bloomberg decided to cancel the contract. He said it cost too much money. Big, huge mistake. Huge mistake. Then, when they took $1 billion out of the police budget, the untold story was they eliminated the homeless outreach unit of the NYPD. These were men and women who were trained psychologically. They befriended the homeless people, the emotionally disturbed. They go in and out of the shelters. They knew the shelter directors. They eliminated the whole division. And you've seen chaos ever since.
So what would you do to address the emotionally disturbed, what we call EDP problem?
Well, look, they're all over. And nobody tells the other story, Ed, is that during the lockdown and pandemic of March of 2020, we needed the beds in both the municipal hospitals and the private hospitals. We didn't have enough beds. I'd be the first to admit people were dying. They would go into the ER, the ICU, and all of a sudden they'd be dead. The city panicked, rightfully so. We didn't know what this was. We released all those emotionally disturbed people. We needed the beds. We never went back out and recovered them once we released them, which we should have tried to do. And what happened? They started living in the subways, the parks, and the streets. They're a danger to themselves and everyone else. The biggest difference, Ed, from when I started the Guardian Angels 45 years ago in 1979 in the Bronx, it was gangs, street gangs, savage skulls, savage nomads, black spades, turbans. There were gangs everywhere. Now it's not so much the gangs, it's the homeless and emotionally disturbed because they're everywhere. That's why you have all these random crimes, unexpectedly in any neighborhood, any time, any place. A guy or a gal has a psychotic immediate reaction and does something horrific to themselves or someone else. So they have to be committed. They have to be taken off the streets. We have plenty of room in the psychiatric hospitals. Cuomo, when he got elected, there were 30,000 state beds for the psychologically disturbed. By the time he left office so as not to be impeached or indicted, there were only 3,000 beds.
Would you reopen Camp LaGuardia?
Absolutely, although Orange County will never permit it. You'd have to find another location that would be more than happy to house mostly men, but some women. Get them out of the urban areas with all the temptations. Let them get some fresh air, good food, learn a trade. Almost like, remember what some people used to refer to as job jail, which you would go to, I forget what they call it, Job Act or something, and they would get you out of the inner city. And you go learn a trade. George Foreman is a perfect example of that. Out of the wards of Houston, he became a member of a job, I forget what they called it, learned a trade, went on to become a great fighter. You probably best know him now for the Foreman Grill. He became a holy roller. It was Ali and, Zaire. But the point is, there was so many men and women who benefited from that, and we could do it again. It's just now it's going to be difficult to get any community to actually agree, like Gitmo on Cuba. A lot of people ask, how do you have Gitmo on Cuba? I mean, remember, the communists hated America. We had a 100-year lease. It'll soon be over, and we have to give it back. We had the lease with Orange County. Unfortunately, Bloomberg didn't understand the importance of that, canceled the lease, and now, where do we put these people who are in need?
That's a good point. Getting back to Adams and his association with people of ill repute, I want to point out one thing. You know that he hung around with Farrakhan. Now, there's a rule in the police department. Not only are you not to associate with people who have criminal records, but you're not allowed to associate people who are involved with hate and hate crime groups. So there were 2 violations that Adams committed. He would associate with Farrakhan, who has a criminal record, and he would be associating with the person who extols hate, particularly anti-Semitism.
Yep.
Rabid anti-Semitic. So this is something that I think is very wrong. He should account for that.
Well, let's go back to when it was 1992. Eric Adams in the police department decided he was going to run against Major Owens, a Democratic congressman, because Major Owens denounced Farrakhan when he came to New York to speak. In fact, Dinkins, to his credit, denounced him. But at that point, Adams said, I'm going to challenge him in a primary. He used the Nation of Islam to get to signatures. Farrakhan endorsed him publicly. Farrakhan said to him, because Adams wanted donations, you needed that. Major Owens was sitting on a war chest. He said, look, we'll give you donations, but you're going to have to do what Cassius Clay did. He converted to the Nation of Islam and became Muhammad Ali. That's when Eric Adams hesitated, vacillated. He used to go up with Comrade Muhammad to the mosque in Harlem. He would be there regularly. He loved the haters, but he realized their checks bounced. And then, Ed, he discovered you good-intentioned Jewish people, and when you contributed to his campaign, he learned your checks don't bounce.
Checks don't bounce.
So now he says, I love Jewish people. But in reality, this guy had his baptism with the Nation of Islam, Farrakhan, Sharpton, Sonny Carson, during Crown Heights, 91. Whose side was he on? You think he was on the Jewish side? Hell no. He was on Sharpton, Sonny Carson's side. Curtis Sliwa was with the Lubavitches. 30 days and 30 nights. How quickly they forget.
Well, that's why you would make a great mayor, and I hope everybody listening to this this show will vote for Curtis when he runs. And with that, I would like to thank you very much for appearing, and you are really something.
And I can say that Captain Mamet, unlike a lot of cops, never earned overtime by arresting me in the days when we were being vilified by the NYPD. You can never say you got any overtime on my back.
Well, at the rank of captain, you didn't get overtime. You didn't get any cash. You got time and a half, which you couldn't use until you retired. Well, thank you very much, Curtis. It's been a great interview. And
by the way, where's Kevin Schroeder today? Where is he out there?
Kevin Schroeder's out somewhere. I don't know where he is. Well, we'll find out.
Hopefully he's not in Qatar with Eddie Caban, the police commissioner.
Okay.
And at this time, I'd like to thank everyone for listening. And if you like what you hear, please subscribe. You could also follow us on Twitter at Cop Talk WABC. That's at Cop Talk WABC. Until next time, be safe out there. God bless law enforcement throughout the world, and God bless America.
Hello, folks. Larry Kudlow here. Pay attention, because China is leading the largest anti-American alliance since World War II. One that's already dumped U.S. bonds, grabbed 43 million acres of our farmland, and is plotting to dethrone the dollar. That's why IRA and 401k savers are protecting their savings with gold. Please go to freegoldguide.com/Kudlow or just call 800-621-3908 for your free gold guide on how to protect your wealth with gold 100% tax-free.